Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. It has been, as they say, a minute since I posted a music and entertainment discussion with music attorney Cassandra Spangler. All I can say is time is flying by. 1 minute it's February, and the next it's July? Anyway, this discussion is about AI in the music industry. The information provided in this video is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. You should contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular issue or problem. Welcome back. Cassandra Spangler and I are here to discuss AI this time, and Cassandra, everybody knows this by now, is a music attorney out of New York. And we are really, really fortunate to have her here with us to break down these things, all things music law related. So, Cassandra, you came up with the topic of AI, which of course stands for artificial intelligence. And I thought that was a fabulous thing to talk about. And I am going to let you take it away because I don't even know where to begin with this. So go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So this idea of artificial intelligence or AI has been coming up a lot lately in different, news stories and current events. And sometimes, it seems like it's taking over every industry, and the music industry is no exception to that. I just want to first off state that I'm not an engineer, I'm not a tech person, so my understanding of how it all works is limited, but it does raise interesting issues related to copyright, which is something that I do know a lot about. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about how AI interacts with copyright law and some issues that have been coming up in terms of AI and copyright.
Sounds great to me.
Awesome. So AI, among many other things, is able to actually create works of art, including photos, visual art, textual works, and music. And so, because of that, because these items, as Janae and I have discussed in prior talks, which you can find on YouTube, these are all types of works that are protected usually by copyright law. And so there are certain limits on what you can do with someone's pre-existing work, or if you're taking elements from it. Sometimes you run into copyright infringement issues, and these are the types of things that have been coming up with works that are created by AI. So basically, these AI companies use existing works, whether it's photos or music or other things, and they sort of train the artificial intelligence to create works that are in the style of something else. So they may tell it, create a song in the style of Bob Dylan, and it's going to come out with something that sounds like a Bob Dylan song. And so then issues come up as far as, is that infringing on copyrights, as well as is it protected by copyright? So in the United States, copyright protection currently requires that the work was created by a human being. And I'm sure when these copyright statutes were written, they never envisioned that a work would be created by anything other than a human being. And now we have AI, which obviously is not a human, and it's a machine, and it's creating works. And so right now, pending any changes in the law, those works that are created by AI are not protected by copyright. So that's kind of the first issue that arises. AI is creating these songs and other things, and they're not protected by copyright, which means other people can use them. And then the flip side of that is whether AI can infringe on copyright if it's not a human. So if a machine is creating a song that sounds like a Bob Dylan song, and it may be something that if it were created by a human, it would clearly be copyright infringement. But if it's created by a machine, what does that mean? And these are things that I think still will need to be figured out with the law, will need to be updated. And this is often the case with copyright law. I mean, technology, especially the past several decades, has tended to move much faster than copyright law moves. And so we'll see advances in technology, and then it takes a while to update the law and create new laws to catch up with that. And I think this is another example of that. And so ways that this has started to come up lately, there are these things called AI extractors. And what they can do is you give it an existing song recording, and it can remove the vocals and just extract the instrumental version. Or it can remove the instrumental version and just extract the a cappella version. And so this AI is doing this to existing songs where the copyrights belong to other people. And so the RIAA, which is the Recording Industry Association of America, it's a collective of all the record labels, basically. They've really started to crack down on these AI extractors. Their position is it's infringing on their copyrights. The labels own the copyrights in these recordings, and the AI is altering those recordings without permission from the copyright owner, which is copyright infringement. And then other ways this is coming up, there's things called deep fake music. So this is another thing you see a lot lately in the news is deep fake photos where, the AI makes it appear as if a certain celebrity was in a certain place by creating basically a fake photograph that looks very, very real. Same thing with voices. They can take someone's voice and then make it sound like they said something they didn't say. And they're doing this also with music. So there are AI companies that are using AI to create cover versions using voices that sound like existing artists but are not. And so a well-known example of this, there was this deep fake Jay-Z cover of the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire. Basically, it was created by AI, and it made it sound like Jay-Z covered this Billy Joel song, which he did not do. It was a fake version of his voice created by a machine, basically. And so Rock Nation, Jay-Z's company, filed copyright claims on YouTube to get this cover version taken down. YouTube initially removed it, but then they reinstated it and said the copyright claim was incomplete. Why did they say the copyright claim was incomplete? Well, because what was copied in there was Jay-Z's voice, and it wasn't from an actual existing recording of his voice. It was a machine AI that probably listened to hundreds of hours of Jay-Z's voice and learned how to reproduce it and then did that. And so there really was no copyright involved because making your voice sound like someone else's voice is not copyright infringement. And so they weren't able to make a copyright claim there. Your voice may be protected by a right of publicity, but that's much more difficult. Copyright law is federal, so there are federal laws that protect copyrights. Rights of publicity, there is no federal right of publicity. It's all state by state, and it varies a lot from different states. Some, states that tend to have a lot of celebrities have higher protections, and then other states have little to almost no protection for rights of publicity. So if you are looking to bring a claim for a deep fake video that is using your voice, it would, as of right now anyway, have to be brought under a right of publicity claim, and that's difficult to do. And this similar sort of issue, although there was no AI involved in this example, was the singer Rick Astley. He filed a lawsuit against the artist Young Gravy. Young Gravy created an interpolation, which is almost like a cover version, but it's where you change some of the melody, change it around a little bit. So he created an interpolation of Rick Astley's song Never Gonna Give You Up. And he actually had a license to create the interpolation. So he had permission to create his version of the song. However, Rick Astley felt like Young Gravy copied his voice, or he tried to sound too much like him in his new version. And he actually filed a lawsuit against him for violating his right of publicity. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out as well. And, if the law gets updated to offer more protection for someone's voice, or, I would imagine that if they haven't already, in the near future, there will be federal laws for some of this deep fake stuff because that's just opening up a door. I think that is very, very dangerous to allow these AI created deep fake photos and recordings and things. Also, this was a big news story related to AI. Capitol Records last year signed an AI rapper named FN Mika. And basically, this was an artist, if you will, that was just not a human, just solely created by AI. And they signed this so-called artist to their label, and then they dropped him shortly after signing him because I feel strange to even refer to it's not even really it's just a purely AI created. It's not a person, it's an AI creation, and they dropped it very quickly because there was a huge public backlash against Capitol Records for doing it. In that situation, this AI rapper did have a human voice, and there was a human being that they were using for his voice. So his voice was not AI created, and the music was also written by a human. It was not AI created music. It's just the image of the artist itself was created by AI. And the artist whose voice, who was kind of behind the scenes, whose voice they were using, who wrote the music and the lyrics, he claims he was never paid. So that was kind of a separate issue. But, that gained a lot of attention, this idea of labels signing AI artists and what would that mean, especially when you think about the fact that AI is now also able to create music. So, in theory, a label could have an artist that was created by AI performing and recording music that was created by AI. And, what would that mean for human creators? And does that mean now that the label's not really having to pay anyone for that because it's their AI that created it? So, all of these kind of interesting issues that are starting to arise. And, this technology seems to be advancing very quickly in terms of what it can do. There was an attorney actually who created some software that he claims can produce and copyright every possible melody. And he did that in an attempt to kind of prove that there's a limit on how many melodies can be created, and there are limitations within copyright law, because if you're using a melody that's too similar to something in the past, then it may be copyright infringement. But the more further and further along we get, and the more music has been created, the fewer truly original melodies there are. And so you think about something like that, and you think about AI, where it could probably do that very quickly, and suddenly every melody has been used before.
Mm.
Um, and then the last thing here, that's been recently in the news is this Chat GPT program or app, which basically I haven't tried it, but it's also AI driven, and it creates AI generated text. And so this is raising a lot of concerns, for example, at colleges, because there are concerns that students will use this Chat GPT app to write term papers and complete their exams for them. And it's apparently a very good app, and it's difficult to tell that it was written by AI and not by a person. And so some colleges have started to ban use of that app, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes as well. And the copyright issues, because all of this AI technology learns from studying existing works that were created by people. And so, if it's analyzing thousands of books that were created by human authors that own the copyrights in those books, and then it's using that to create text, there are issues in terms of whether that's copyright infringement. So I think all of this, we can kind of synthesize it and raises questions. Will these machines replace human artists at some point? Or are there elements of being human that we can add to music and artwork that a machine will never be able to duplicate? Also, issues with the fact that these works created by AI are not currently protected by copyright. So, that dramatically lowers the value of any work that's created by AI, because if it's not protected by copyright, it means it's free for anyone to use it. And so, that may kind of help with some of these issues as well. And these issues with copyright infringement. So again, the AI machines, they learn by studying existing works. So if you tell it to create a song in the style of Bob Dylan, the AI will have to listen to a bunch of Bob Dylan songs to know what that means. And the more that you put into these databases that these AI machines are learning from, the harder it then becomes to prove copyright infringement. Because if it has 10,000 songs in its database, it's very difficult then to prove if it took any specific elements from any one song, and
Mm.
therefore whether or not it infringed on any copyrights. So I think it will be really interesting to see where this stuff goes. Again, it seems to be advancing very quickly, and so I think that you will start to see new laws in the near future to try to address some of these issues.
Wow. I don't know why I'd never really thought about AI creating songs, but I didn't. And I am a little nervous about this. I'm glad we're having this conversation and more people are aware of it because, like you said, we need to figure out some legislation around it, right? Because if we don't get a handle on it, I go, well, so all the artists, and I'm not even just talking about music artists, are now suddenly not able to make a living at all. Now, we all know that as music artists, we don't make a lot of money as it is, unless you're, one of the top, whatever, top 100. But everybody would be gone.
Yeah. Yeah, in theory it could replace, it could replace human artists. Although it's interesting to think about, when Capitol Records signed this FN Mika AI artist and received all the backlash, it's interesting to think about what that would mean if labels started to focus more on AI artists. But the flip side of that is that works created by AI are not protected by copyright, then it would kind of disincentivize the labels from doing that, because all this output that the AI is creating would not be protected.
Right. So humans could then recreate it and
Right,
and it's fine, right?
right.
And so, having said that, then the other side is that maybe it opens it up more for artists or makes it easier for artists because they could just find all these AI works and copy them and be able to register them, right?
Potentially, yeah. I guess it would depend if the works created by AI are in the public domain, then you would not be able to, you could copyright if you're adding to them, but you would not be able to copyright the underlying public domain work.
Okay. So I guess then the question would be how do you distinguish between public domain and not protected? Does that make any sense?
It does. It does.
I guess if you don't file, then it would be a free for all. No? Because does public domain have to go through the process of being copyrighted and then age out?
No.
Oh.
No. So it can fall automatically into the public domain under some situations. And it's a good question. I don't know whether, and I think maybe it's too new of an issue, but I don't know whether the works created by AI are in the public domain, or are they up for grabs. That I don't know.
Okay, but so AI can do this, and yet it's not considered infringement because it's not a human.
So it may be considered infringement, but the reverse is not true. It is not protected by copyright if it's not created by a human. If it's not a human, but it's infringing on someone else's copyright, then that may still be an issue.
Okay. So is the jury out on that one still? That part of it? Or is it a fact like it's infringement?
That's a good question too, which I don't know the answer to that, because I wonder then who would you be suing?
Mm,
Because it seems like at some point, initially AI was used by humans as a tool, to do things like touch up a photo or maybe even something like auto tune, and then at some point it crossed over to where it is now. And again, I'm not a tech person, so I don't know the mechanics behind it, but at this point, AI is now able to create its own works of art,
Right.
versus just being used as a tool by human beings. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, are those works protected? And if so, who would they belong to? And the same thing with infringement. Is that infringement? And if so, who would be the defendant that you're suing for copyright infringement?
Right. Yeah, and I know, I mean, as you know, I'm in the voiceover world too, and people are very alarmed by what's happening with AI and the voiceover world because I mean, there are things like you just said, you can study a voice and let's say there's some commercial and I'd like a voice that sounds like, and I always say Morgan Freeman because of
Mm.
course he just has that voice.
Yeah,
And instead of paying Morgan or another human that sounds has a similar sound, we could just do AI and we're done. And that's a little scary again when you're trying to make a living doing this that
right,
a machine is going to take over. But of course, and as we talked about before we started recording, this is not necessarily new technology in maybe in the arts and entertainment world it is, but we've had self-service checkout lines for a lot of years now.
right.
So I wonder if we took a look at, not us now, but if they took a look at how that has affected the workforce, which I'm assuming it has affected it pretty greatly. When you have, I'm going to say, a grocery store that used to employ 25 cashiers, and now we have six or seven self service lines, and now we only have the need for 10 cashiers. Now, I know that they have to have a monitor, at least one monitor for all these self service checkouts. I mean, on the surface, it says, yeah, we're losing people. We lost half the cashiers. At the same time, did jobs get created because you have to service the checkout, the self checkout lines, the components that go into it, the voice behind it, all of that stuff. I'm assuming somebody did some very deep research on that to figure out if in fact it is a loss of jobs due to AI in that scenario with the cashiers. But I don't know that we've really been talking about it a whole lot. So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I remember, there was a little bit of an outcry. This was maybe 10 years ago. I feel like some restaurant chains started to replace servers with, basically an iPad at the table, where you would place your order into it. And I remember hearing a little bit of backlash about how that was getting rid of jobs, but it seemed like it died down pretty quickly, and places have adopted that approach. And so, yeah, it would be very interesting to see how many jobs have been replaced by AI or other technology, and whether that created more or less jobs in other sectors, like as Janae mentioned, fixing these devices and coming up with these new technology and algorithms and all this other stuff that is required for AI to work.
And the art part of it, I mean, you could essentially, recreate a Picasso drawing, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, would that really be worth as much as a Picasso, a real Picasso? That was a good point that you made. Is it still worth the same if it's created by a computer, essentially?
Right. Especially if there's no copyright protection, because it means that anyone can copy it without paying you. And so it really would lower the value.
Right, right. Which so then I said, and you're gonna counter everything, right? I say then that to me would mean that true artists, the human artists, and they could still use a computer to make their creations, but they are the brain behind it, would become more valuable. if you have a bunch of AI creations out there, I think.
Yeah, it may just kind of shift things to where, which they already sort of do. Let's say they need background music for a film and they don't have a very high budget. And this is something Janae knows a lot about, sync licensing, and we've had other videos on this topic with other people as well. But if they have a low budget, sometimes they'll hire studio musicians and they'll kind of tell them, I want something in this similar feel as this popular song. And as a lawyer, whenever I hear that, I have clients ask me all the time, somebody said they wanted something in the style of this. Is that copyright infringement? And it's such a gray area. But
Mm,
I think maybe those types of jobs might get replaced more with AI generated music, where they just sort of need something there and they don't have the budget to hire someone, and then maybe commissioned music that is created by human artists will cost more.
right. And I would think though too, when it comes to creating something in the style of when musicians are asked to do that, they would actually still have to pay both sides of the copyright. So the original artist is going to get paid, not artist, but the writer, I should say,
Hmm.
is going to get paid, even though it's not their original work that's being used.
Yes, yeah. So it kind of depends on. That's why I always hate that phrase in the style of, because it's like, are you using any elements, or do you just want something? Does this song make you feel like you are drinking a pina colada on the beach, and you
Mm,
want something that gives that same feeling, or do
right.
you want something? Because I do think a lot of times it's sort of coded for copy this song without
Okay.
saying you copied it. In which case, you're absolutely right, Janae. They need to get a license or else they're in trouble.
Yes.
But yeah, it's always such a gray area. And I think that is AI is taking over those types of roles.
Okay. And you know what? It's bringing up for me too. It's making me scareder. It would be so much easier for AI to do that, to create something that sounds a lot like this song, but make it a little different. So much so that it does take it out of the copyright claim.
Yep.
D
Yep.
it's like, okay, well, see, that note right there changed everything.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh, no. So, yeah, that's scary. And you yourself have not come up across anybody dealing with this personally, right?
No, I have not
Good.
yet had any. And that, it's like, how far do you want to take it? At some point, is AI going to need its own lawyer? I mean, it's
Oh.
crazy to think how far this could go, and how quickly it could get there.
Now, see, going back though to now who was it that hired the AI artist?
Capitol Records, yeah, Capitol
Capitol
Records
Records.
signed him.
So it is interesting to me that behind all of that was actually real people. It's just that the artist, the persona
Hmm.
is not real.
Right. And it was controversial because there was a human being, but it wasn't a scenario where this AI thing was not like his alter ego or his persona. He was just being hired to be the voice of the AI and to write the lyrics. And he claims he was never paid, and
Okay.
so that was controversial. But I think they're sort of getting to the point with the technology where, in theory, they could have bypassed him and they could have just used AI voices and AI
Mm.
created music. So it will be interesting to see if they get there, and if they do, what kind of reaction there is from public to it.
Well, and now see, now I'm thinking about, and I'm going back to voice acting. And in my mind, I'm thinking, and I could be completely off on this, but it's like talking toys. They are
Hmm.
inanimate objects, but there's a real person in there speaking. Um, And obviously, somebody wrote the script or the lines for that person to say, but it's coming from a toy. How is that besides and I know getting into the whole but that voice actor was paid and which is exactly the way it should be. So if we take that out of the equation, how is it different from having a person singing the songs, writing the songs, but it's this, I guess, inanimate object that is delivering it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in that scenario it is similar. I was just reading something where I forget which label they signed just yesterday another group that is it's made up of actual producers and songwriters. They haven't released the names yet, but it won't be their images. It will be an NFT of whales. They're these like whale looking characters wearing clothing, and that's going to be the image for the group. But there are real people behind it. And that to me isn't that much different from something like, I remember the group, the Gorillas, they would always perform behind a screen,
Hmm.
but they were real people and there was no question they were real people. Or Daft Punk always wearing the masks, and
Right.
there are people under there. I think where it starts to get different with AI is that AI can actually think for itself. And so there's a risk of, in theory, you don't even need any people to be involved.
Yeah, see, that whole thinking for itself is where I go, wait a minute. I still have a tough time wrapping my head around that, I think.
Same, yeah. And they learn what your shopping habits are, and so they'll suggest certain
Yes.
things to you. And so I guess in theory, these AI artists could become almost super artists. They would be able to learn. They wouldn't have any limitations the way that humans have limitations on what they can do. And they would learn, okay, this song got 5 million streams and this song only got 50 streams. And so it'll start to learn what people want to hear in theory. And
Right.
if it's quote unquote performing live, it'll be able to learn from the reactions of the crowd and change based on that, the way that humans can't do. So it'll be interesting to see. It is scary when you kind of think about how far it could potentially go, but we won't go there. We'll just say it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and it may be that it just doesn't, that there's something in a human created piece of art or music that cannot be replicated by a machine.
Mm, I don't even know. I'm dumbfounded, honestly, because I think this conversation really made it hit home for me that AI learns. Even though I already knew that, but it really just sunk in for me.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, we could certainly, yes, look at the downside and the doom and gloom side and feel like the world is ending. Um, but there are tons and tons of positives. There's a lot of that AI can do that's saving people's lives. That's making life a whole lot easier for folks. There's definitely an upside, and this is true about everything in life, right? There's always a positive and a negative, and it always depends on in whose hands it's in. And so, all right, I won't be sad.
And that's a good point. This stuff can be used to not just copy somebody's music, but maybe it can also be used to come up with new medical techniques that will save lives, or maybe it can be used to come up with solutions for climate change and other things like this
Right.
that humans haven't been able to do. So, yeah, that's a very good point.
Now I'm thinking about, if somebody passes away, AI, which we already have, right? The holograms can reproduce that person, maybe not physically, as in you can touch them, but you can see them. And they would act like that person.
Yes. And that's a good point, actually, the holograms, because those are controversial as well. Some people don't think that some of these holograms should be going on tour, or that people should be reproduced as a hologram. And so, yeah, that's a very good point.
I don't think I will be around for most of this stuff. But who knew we'd have cell phones?
Right.
So maybe I
Right.
will be around for it.
And who knew we would be, streaming all of our music for the most part and not going down and
Yeah,
buying CDs anymore. So,
exactly. And who knew that I could be an independent artist and have
yes,
music out there because, it wasn't a thing back in the 70s and 80s, right?
right,
Or good lord, even the 90s.
right. Yep.
So there's, yeah, more proof that progress can make things better.
Yes, definitely. It definitely goes both ways.
All right, so Miss Cassandra, can you please tell everyone where they can contact you, find you in case they need your services for all the things you do relating to music and copyright and all that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So the best place to go would be my website, which is cspanglermusiclaw.com. And from there, you'll be able to find all of my contact information. Again, it's cspanglermusiclaw.com.
Awesome. And do you just deal with musicians or are you representing other entertainment types?
So, not just musicians, but all different types of people that work in the music industry, songwriters, producers, managers, indie labels, as well as I also handle copyrights and trademarks. And for those, that's for anybody because it's the same process whether you are a musician or whether you own a bakery, it's all the same. So, yep, anything music related, copyright related, trademark related.
Excellent. When it comes to contracts, do you represent people other than music industry folks?
I would say for the most part, no.
Okay.
But yeah, there are some exceptions, so I wouldn't always say, I'd say if you're wondering, feel free to reach out to me. But for the most part, it's just the music stuff.
Okay. Good to know. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having yet another eye opening conversation with us.
Thank you for having me, Janae.